Computer. All right. So towards the topic, um, like coming from this sort of question of how do we see this, um, but we could move to a question like, um, where do you see this potentially going if you look like from your glasses, like your lenses, like what kind of things you would like that comes out of it, whether it's output or a style of process in the future? How do you see it moving?
Hmm. I would like to definitely work on OBOK and refine
Mm-hmm.
OBOK. That would be something I would like doing. I would also enjoy making some more deep use cases investigation, maybe like come up with places where these methods fit in
Mm-hmm.
with less friction, of some with more friction. That's also fun. And also, like, I don't know, like the Wonder Home game, I really would like to go deeper. Like that's personally me, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's a lot of that can be done there if follow like a collective method of, like, I don't know, understanding the mutual credit currency there from an economic perspective, writing something down and making it accessible to
Yeah.
organizations, stuff like that. um that's what comes to my mind immediately.
Um, yeah, actually, um, let's put that as its own topic. Like, I'm making kind of notes, even though I'm bad at it, but like, um, but the Wonder Home, I think that it might be worth a visit. Like one angle I've been thinking of that direction is, um, I mean, there's a couple of interesting things about Wonder Home. I'll be short with this because it's a small topic in a large view, but one is the of course the kind of token model, but also kind of variations of it, because I do like the kind of simplicity that you're kind of coding your social um, norms in a way through the tokens and spending and gaining them. But then the second one is that it has some nifty things which are kind of low from many sources, but it does some nifty ways of defining something in an active form, whether it's a character, place, event. That its definition style is something that is interestingly hackable, and both of those I think could be developed further. Like okay, if you start a token from the simple, but also like straight from the social, what can you do with that? That's one direction. And then the second is like, okay, if your quote unquote job description or role description in general or place description starts from these kind of things, what can it do? So maybe that's a session in and of its own to extract those.
Yes, we could have like play sessions where we
Mm-hmm.
also have a meta button to go out and like analyze a certain thing, and maybe already with a way of preparing it for um making it public in our own framework.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
that could be interesting. Like dissecting certain game mechanics within our own
yeah,
grammar.
yeah, and also towards Obok, there's like like said in the last interlude, I was sketching and talking to Jakub actually. This sort of like a organizational Photoshop where you take a scene instrument and you take a role instrument, um, which is a nifty metaphor. But I do think there is something there, and definitely like the oboe could be calibrated towards that and cleaned up for that. Um, but the one thing that I thought was interesting in that direction is that these things can get complicated for people quite easily. But like, while not everybody uses Photoshop, it's a sort of complex kind of allegory. Like people can start thinking of layers, they understand the tools, and you only have to kind of switch that. It's not so much it's about like drawing an image, even though it can contain images, but it's really like maybe even changing the organization around you. That the canvas is the, say, the 5 people rather than like a concrete white paper. And what you're changing is this, like now there's this role available and somebody takes it, this kind of thing. So it's kind of a game engine at the same time, if that makes sense. Anybody else, like in terms of what kind of directions you would like to see this go, whether it's output or process?
Yeah, I like what Pablo just said, and really this like kind of architectural perspective seems like a kind of great platform to think this, or many of these like things and so on. Uh, I kind of can see that there is a Discord channel or something like that, and there are like multiple topics, and so and uh, uh, threads that kind of accumulate knowledge and information and so on, or something like that. So that like somehow the research is being kind of almost real-time documented or so on. I'm not like everything that is being said, but if there is a kind of some sort of like new perspective, or someone has been testing something or something like that, or suggesting new formulation or something like that for OBOK or something, that could be kind of great, and start like producing this sort of like the textual material that is very easy to like then transfer into some other more like solid form. And I don't know, it's kind of tempting to think that there could be some sort of like public web page or something like that, kind of even like outlining the kind of topics and some takes on different subjects and so on. Maybe something like if there is it cannot take too much like time and resources, but if there is some sort of like this sort of like structures, it may also start to kind of generate content in a more like formalized way or something like that. I don't know, but so this is very interesting development.
Yeah, like we talked about the Discord channel last time, and I was thinking about it, and the more I think about it, kind of makes sense because Discord has upped a bit of its features, and like I think the Mikael's idea of channels for different initiatives, like call them whatever, but like Obox, etc. And there's still missing a name, kind of scene slash dungeon game we've been playing the last couple of tests, which I think is quite promising, but needs more rounds. Like another channel, whatever, or underneath channel of Obok. Doesn't really matter, but like, but that would be an interesting avenue. But then the playtest channel, given that in Discord you can do voice, you can do screen sharing, video, and somehow the kind of idea of playtest channel in Discord is almost more native than even this Zoom, because you can have like a can come in and see a playtest is ongoing and it's open kind of thing, um, uh, and you have all the same features ultimately, uh, but it's also like has this sort of dynamic that somebody has the video on and screen shares and they take it down and somebody else puts it on, and like it seems very kind of fitting which is not a surprise because the game people were among the first users of Discord, so it's kind of tailored to them. So yeah, it kind of makes sense, and maybe like maybe Discord would be first, and then thinking of something like a website after. But like I don't disagree with it. It's interesting, but like Discord could be a good kind of content upgrade without much of a task in itself. Like it's very easy to set up. Yeah, I don't know how to record on. There's probably a record anyway on Discord, but yeah, yeah, like and then one could kind of put the Telegram channel into a kind of more news channel, like because there's still people who are there lurking. Some of them are interesting and have actually communicated. So I'm happy with that. So yeah, like but I do see that could quite work, like in a way, like.
Just want to maybe add one thing, a bit down the lines of Pablo's. Don't, you know, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. What I in the form that we have here, what I enjoy very much is this kind of oral first.
Yeah.
Thing. So like I think I'm getting maybe a bit. In German, you say irritiert, like, or confused is then the English word. When we, so look, what happens to me here is we meet regularly, so that's two things, and then we speak and we keep the session focused, that which is basically what you do, Pekka. And out of that, more or less, the written part has kind of been generated. Like, I mean, of course, Pekka, you have done kind of pre-curating work, or like writing work on that, and a lot also. But what I enjoy is that we've been basically populating these things through our oral first approach, and I think that would be something to kind of not at least forget about. That way is how the carriage runs in this case, and or like has been anyway. And I think that's a bit kind of, in other words, saying what I said already before. This thing is a thing, so we don't. You know, I think we don't need to maybe so much speak about transforming it, just because we're used to disseminating papers thing.
Yeah.
So I think if we think, for example, about a Discord, which is a platform I very much enjoy, and I've been seeing great use made of it, actually in combination with Twitter, for example, or in combination with Twitch, so like not so much with Telegram, because I think they're quite close with one another, and maybe you know, one is more a bit, it feels a bit more like an evolution of the other, like Discord, an evolution of Telegram once you start splitting topics. But I just want to really say that I think what is happening here, it's public, it's documentable, and it's even documented, and it's an engine also, like so. And I think it's also interesting to kind of assume the oral mode.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Like actually, one of the reasons I think like Discord seemed fitting because it has this. You know, originally it was a voice channel, and you can have a session, you can have a channel where nobody's sharing video. It's actually more common there than Zoom. Like you have to do an extra action to put the video on. But I get that you're also making a kind of larger point. Like, how about this? Like, what I would find interesting, like I agree with your general Gestalt sense of the process, and I do think this whole, like, essentially having a discourse, talking over, and using also that for playing is a key engine. But in addition, I think this sort of entertaining the possibility of releasing game-like structures, and that for me is an interesting combination. And I wouldn't make this sort of like I have Mikael, how would you translate Iisakin kirkko? Because I only have Finnish in my head now. It's a Finnish phrase.
Church of Isaac.
Yeah, it would be a literal, but like in
Yeah.
Finnish we say like.
Oh yeah, niin kuin Iisakin kirkossa. Yeah.
And let's not make it into a Church of Isaac, which means that let's not make it into a project that lasts forever and it becomes too large and kind of pushes things down. So yes, releasing games, but not making them into Church of Isaac, like projects.
I think. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I just meant that. I think I said that in the previous session. The form is, to me, it would be very important to consider the form of, if we speak output, because there's going to be, like right now, this is what we do, the two things, the Google Doc and our conversation, those two things, materialities of what we're using. So adding any other will mean that a certain translation effort has to be made. And here we have a choice, which translation effort we want to entertain.
Yes.
And if it becomes an academic paper, well, that's one way. If it becomes a box of stuff that we can give to people, it's another way. And so, like, I think maybe what I'm just the only point that I'm just trying to say, and maybe I'm just talking to myself because none of you are having this problem, is like, if we speak about a paper or any type of this kind of known academic forms of outputting, that doesn't have to be our format at all. We don't have to do that. I don't think we have to.
Yeah. So maybe one nugget of data to introduce here. So the other talk I had, and this is still in the premises of kind of Common Stack, I was talking with Michael Zargam, who is one of the kind of also founderish figures. I can't remember the order, but has done a lot of the structures. He's a good friend. There will be a almost 2-hour dual interview coming on a block between me and Michael, which is was actually kind of interesting, maybe, but that's a whole nother topic. But what we're talking about is that, so their interest is to form a research unit, but not a university one. Essentially entertain the possibility of, he was loaning Primavera de Filipi's concept exstitution. Not an institution, but an exstitution. Not a thing that is built towards inside, but like built towards outside. So and this is was described by him as, I mean, it's a public channel. I won't go to private conversations, but anyway, it seems like that it's first of all, it's an interesting project, but it's a serious one. Let's put it that way. And so, in this sense, like also what is under question is new publication forms and taking a much more flexible perspective of what is a publication of research. So, for example, a game with maybe commentary is potentially a publication of research. And like I'm also, having come from academia, having escaped from there more accurately, I wouldn't kind of follow some of the practices there. But if there is like a form that kind of can entertain that, actually publishing a game-like format and that can be taken as research, that I think is interesting in itself.
Can I ask for clarification when you say
Sure.
publishing a game? Do you mean like one could go to a shop and buy a game? Like
No.
You mean a game that is being played?
Yeah, like
that I would like very much. Like
maybe
almost like a recording of a soccer game, but now it's another game.
Yeah, maybe I'll share my screen. I'll pick something super. I'll have to just scroll a bit. But like, I'm thinking of like, if you would take, say, like Obok, but you would rather polish it a bit and make it maybe easier to understand. But it essentially could be the core could be text, like essentially, like so I'm thinking, well, this is too graphically fancy maybe, but I'll just put something on. So I mean, this is essentially a PDF. It's a itch.io culture game publication, and while it's relatively fancy for itch.io, it had a Kickstarter, whatnot, of maybe 15,000 something, but like it still gives the picture of like you can share games and game structures in the manner of even just a PDF or some kind of a other document, and that can become this sort of communication point for games. Like, of course, there are much more simpler forms. I didn't have one handy. That's why I shared this. But yeah, like so I'm more thinking this and then whatever we want to do, like in terms of, but the end is not video. I mean, it's not outside of programming. I do think that can enter the picture as well as it's small, but like there is a way to kind of share gameable structures even from just text.
Yes, and I mean, I'm not clear like now completely on what that document there presents because it's going by steadily. But I'm just saying that, like, I mean, I mean now of course we're publishing these conversations that we're having, or these exchanges and these playtests, and to me they're just like, they feel like, possible forms absolutely in themselves. So,
yeah, like this was more like a visual presentation, trying to move it to another end of things than say a game bought in a shop that has been fitted into a box or whatever it is, like this kind of thing. Like I said, I could have picked something that is slightly less stylish, but this was like, because I was speaking from my recent folder, like so more about this. Like ultimately, if you're looking at it, I mean, it's a stylized, somebody graphic designed it, but that's not even necessary. But it's ultimately just text that is telling like how to play. Here are the roles and so on. Like, but the point was not to go detail into the game, just to point out this sort of simplicity of it.
Just a very short comment. I kind of like that if there would be like, I love these sessions, and at the same time, I really much like, I want to do some sort of like, I want to try to figure out structures and kind of think them through, and also like get comments, and why I was thinking kind of, or one reason to think about like Discord, for instance, there is a threshold in posting something that you are kind of developing in your mind, and that is very sketchy. Posting that to this large Telegram group, and and I don't want people to have to kind of read all that through. But if there would be a topic, let's say like, okay, this structure here, and I could just like post something under that, then maybe like we here go and read that, and maybe someone else, if one is interested, but like or maybe only one other people read it and maybe comments it, but like so I would feel very comfortable to be able to do that, and to know that people don't have to kind of read it all, but I would still love feedback, and then I wouldn't like just have to spam Pekko every week.
I've been encouraging Mikael to send, because the stuff is really good. So, but maybe that's an answer. I think with Discord, there's always a possibility of putting too many channels, like that people get lost, because like there's not like always, there should be kind of like a balance between amount of people and channels. But at the same time, it does immediately, you can think of like, 3 or 4 or 5 channels with this kind of group. That makes sense. And also like to encourage, like one can put like maybe a brainstorming channel, or maybe even make a convention that, like when you're writing for a certain game, then you put in the beginning, this is brainstorming and or whatever, and use these kind of things to make it slightly easier. So I can see that then like the more topical thing might topical channels might help on that.
Are any of you members in Trust Discord?
Trust? I don't think so.
No.
I'm not, but I would love to.
I'd recommend you do. You have to be. You know the organization?
Yes, I know
Yeah.
them. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just became a member. I think I'm paying for this. I guess I am. They will be part also of this conference that we're organizing now, Pekko. Just speaking of this, and I mean, you can.
Yeah.
I mean, you should just all be there anyway. They are having a fantastic Discord. So I think at the moment it's getting a bit. It's coming maybe a bit to this point where you're saying that you have a bit too many channels, but that's also because they are indeed a super active community on that Discord, and they're populating them well. It's for me, it's a great example of how to run a Discord. But it also depends. So this is maybe a very personal note to the whole question here, but maybe one that hopefully makes it point. To me, participating with you guys in these conversations and play tests here is something that gives me the incentive to do it, to be here. And while since I'm not a single person, I have a baby and a wife and 2 other kids, and I just started my studies. By the way, I started my studies in Aalto this week. And then the job, and then the residence. So like I'm not really sitting. Too few times do I sit, as we say, the leisure to really sit, focus, write a message, participate in such a thing. So like I know that like I'm not exemplary in this in many ways, because I see how this can super succeed, but it would be a form just for my own personal side harder to participate in, and then certainly one where I would be sad if it would replace the rhythmicality that we have now. So that would be something to give to think. And then maybe on that note, since I mentioned Trust already, they have done quite beautiful series of presentations, both like publicly, but also like inside the Discord. They have 2 is it not 2 or 3 formats? So they're running Sandbox, which is each like work presentation of one of the members. That's every other Tuesday, I think. Every other Tuesday is then a reading group. And then on every other Thursday now, they're having kind of a game session, so trying out games and reading texts that have something to do with the games. And so I guess what I'm saying is that these kind of in time, these sequenced, I mean, now we're speaking about how to organize a Discord, so we can step away from that. But I thought it made sense, since we now kind of decided at least to think about that form. And I want to kind of relate with what we're doing at this moment. I have been doing. So this could be maybe a nice way to pick up on the continuity of this discussion, while adding textual containers for more maybe focused research as text channels.
Yeah, like I know Trust decently. I mean, they're in Berlin. Like, if I think you're talking about that Trust, and because everything you said fits that. So, um, like, I think the key thing is also like for them, it's also a pattern of growth. Like, it's like jumping to that level is usually not functional, but kind of like actually trying to keep the good things is usually a matter of growth, not trying to jump. And like in Trust, I mean, there are many effective factors. They have a nice crypto investor or couple behind the Trust itself, which of course helps like running it. But I do think like um, there's also a different thematic, like I think this sort of like a more deep dive into these structures, which is a kind of thing like, and knowing this other groups, it's sort of missing, or most of the people are not aware of, like that these are small things, and also kind of like a fairly outside of crypto and traditional things, or in traditional cultures. So like I think like that, yeah, I think one should kind of imagine its own pattern of growth for it, but I think it's really up to everybody. Like, it's whatever people feel are the good qualities should be listened to and kind of shared, and trying to find a balance between, because like I said, like I don't disagree with any of this. I'm not, by the way, looking at like let's grow as fast as possible at all. I quite like what we have, but it's also good to entertain this question, and like I like what we have, plus like this sort of entertaining this release of a game form in more small scale. Like, it's not like now we do our game, but like here's the first form we want to make publicly available, and see what you think of it, because that in itself is a form of communication that I see kind of healthy in a way.
Yeah. And it's so this is another thing that I also meant to say. I think that it's also part of the OBOC kind of intro paragraph, and I think that's something that has been working quite beautifully in these conversations and in the plate, is that one session something kind of pops up, appears, makes sense. Session something completely else is continued, and like I'm a bit thinking of like this kind of is a bit like a zine culture, right? Like, so you put out a zine. That's what that's what that is. It's a staple bound research kind of result in a way, and that I could, and because I'm also like, I think so maybe we're getting to something that I recognize a bit as a kind of image that could also kind of fit in a way, is that what you speak about also with this, like, not fast growth at any cost. That's absolutely what I think is already happening here, and I think that should be really that is a dear thing to just have, and to kind of recognize and be with that, and then this kind of iterativity, and also like maybe, sorry, another point I was actually meaning to me to say is that like most of our sessions have been very different from one another. Like, we've done very different things, we've discussed very different things. Today, again, we're doing a very different discussion than what we've been discussing the other times. But still, we're working on the soil of organization as games.
Yes.
And I think that's a precious thing too. Like, not to think of like it has to be in one essay form, or it has to be like, it can be very different, you know, points. They can be tiny, they can be iterative themselves, but they kind of, it's about kind of a biodiversity kind of thing in a way, no?
Yeah. As a point of interest, these kind of small games have rejuvenated the scene culture, even the concept, which is interesting. Like they precisely to look towards these sort of smaller things have started like calling their publication scenes again, like to make this sort of explanation why it's 12 pages and why the graphic layout is not the best or is weird or whatever. So it's an interesting overlap between what you were saying.
Have you seen this? It became sort of a meme in Twitter. People saying like, "We want worse games that are shorter, that are made by people who are paid more." Have you seen them? Sort of like
Yes.
a respect of time and being respectful to others people's attention, and I like these small formats and this attitude towards them. I just remember that tweet. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also like I think there are some healthy like general directions. This whole like the re-flourishing of scenes, which has even smaller things, you know, like people in itch.io, they publish like 2 pages because it has this sort of support for, you know, like draft versions. Like in a way, like you can start asking for even payment for that, or even say like you can donate. Because the people who get the draft version, if they pay for it, they will get the final version. They will be marked down to that publication, and once it grows, they can just download the new versions for free. So that's happening a lot, that people are putting like, here's my ideas, but if you think it's going to a cool direction, you can, you know, donate a couple of bucks. Or now it's getting actually serious, so I'm asking the $3-4 or whatever the structure is, but it's essentially kind of supporting this sort of very drafty start, but already kind of releasing. Like, who was it? Was it you, Pablo, who brought the concept of release instead of publication? I can't remember who said it.
I don't remember either.
I think it may also be part of one of the card designs, kind of, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
could be. Yeah, somebody said it out loud. I might be mixing context. Also could be Jakub. But like wherever it came from, like I think it's a good idea. Like in the sense of like thinking of the release in the sense of a release, not like a publication. Um, like so that's a possibility. Uh,
Something I like very much, like you can have like a 10-page long publication, but I think like this OBOK type of like structures. However, you can build entire worlds and worlds on top of worlds and so on. So it doesn't mean that the scale of the game or the level of details would be like bad or so on. So it's kind of this sort of like a Minecraft type of structure or something like that, but
yeah,
in the perspective of like imagination and so on. It's really interesting.
yeah. I think that is actually one of the reasons, amongst others, but why people really like this sort of short format in these kind of cultures is precisely this, that you know people are taking 2-page games and 1-page games and then playing them again and again, and new things develop, etc. And there's something very fractalic about that, but in a pragmatic sense, like that the game really doesn't exhaust itself. Like maybe if you play the same game over and over again, you might find some patterns, but usually they can be playable in many ways. And I think it's not there yet, but I think there is a possibility of thinking of not even full games, but you know, like here is an interesting mechanic, and you can play around it and maybe plug it somewhere or just use it as it is and see what happens with that. That's, I haven't really seen that much. That like cannot think of any really example, but I think it's completely possible to think in that way as well. Like so yeah, like for me, ideally, if there were to be research, it would be kind of in that kinds of forms. Like, oh, we found a new conception paradigm for organization, or we found this mechanic of, and here's 3 different variants of situations it can create, but there's more, but these are the ones that we so far conceived, kind of thing. That would be, I think, rather interesting. Whether people accept that or not, but they're like particularly, like, I don't think there's any rush to it, but what it could open is this sort of expansion of a dialogue, like people actually hearing people testing out something. And like if we put out a very wacky organizational form and somebody actually decides to run it for laughs or whatever, or over a weekend or whatever it is, it would be interesting in terms of like the types of discourse it can create.
In the spirit of scrappiness, can we consider one of our Google Docs already ready for release?
I mean, we could like the one of the topics at the table which Pablo brought out and we visited last time was this, that there is like the cleaning of the OBOC structure, especially from the learnings from that, and the also because the structure is kind of what we use for this sort of dungeon-like or mapping is kind of inherited. It uses the similar scene concept. It has a little bit of a different take on roles, but you could say it's a variant of that. But if one would kind of clean that up or expand it a bit, what I'm mostly thinking is usability. Like, is it also like if somebody who doesn't know anything about this, can they actually understand what they have? And I don't think it's there yet, but I don't.
But I mean, even not this one. I mean, even like any of the recordings. Was it not this XORG?
Yeah, that's the dungeon game. Like it just
right, the dungeon
is,
mega dungeon type of thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like, I mean, even that. I mean, and not really with the ambition of being clear, just with the ambition of releasing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a matter of like I think that's definitely a direction. I'm probably that I wait too long on these kind of things. My reaction would be, let's clean it up a bit, or let's add some help, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Like, I was actually thinking if we weren't having this session, I would have kind of revisited the, let's say, the rules of that, because I think they are going to a good direction. But also like, okay, what kind of things they need more, and use that for a second revision to get it more closer to usability in a way. And I think that's still a possibility for a session at some point.
But I think what is my, I mean, I get the concern also, and I think it's, you know, in the spirit of discovery. I'm also thinking as just a kind of public kind of token in a way, you know, just throwing it out there. Like, we don't have to, like, if there's, in terms of like being close to mastership through copying in a way, I mean, you just state that this is based on the mechanic of, and you find that there, and then you say, so this is how that has gone, and suddenly, even if we don't kind of in a way publish the game structure, but we really publish the record of that one scene that we were fleshing out in that stage, well, then people get to think that. Like, I mean, it's an illustration. It's basically something that has happened. And it's one more kind of seed on the soil of, orgs as games, or the other way around.
Sure. What do you, Pablo, Mikael, think?
I think, yeah, there's a lot of value in this sort of like honest, fragmented, this is what's happening, here it is, have it. I mean, from a software release perspective cycle, let's say, publishing as soon as possible is more often than not a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the OBOK is in a pre-alpha state, and we have to just push it a bit into alpha, and it will still be early, but public. I think that's good. Maybe I also think we should, like, with this notion in our head of let's make it public, give it an additional push, and then of course keep working on it, like all documents are mutable, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
Good ideas. Kind of good discussion, but I'm just like thinking, if you just like go and publish and so kind of what is the network where it will kind of land or so on. I'm just like thinking, what type of a opening of discussion will it be, kind of. So kind of then maybe, for instance, should it have should there be some sort of like Twitter account where you publish it? Hey, we are doing this sort of like things, and here is a link to Alpha 001 type of thing, and that might be very, very cool. Then again, if it's just like we just publish or release because we want to release, kind of, no matter if it's like buggy or some or kind of, so if it leaves like impression that, oh hey, I wonder if this is like where this is going and so on, kind of, I very much like the idea of like releasing, but at the same time, I think there should be something like, okay, now if we kind of release here, maybe then after like 2 months or 4 months or something, we want to do it kind of the same way, or kind of like, so that we can actually be in discussion and not just like releasing because we want to release, kind of.
So I think, if I may respond, that I think also the act of publishing as an act is nice. One doesn't maybe have to think the full circle. One doesn't have to maybe think the reception into the publishing. One can just publish, and then that's that. It exists now. It's out, and people can see. And in terms of finishing, that not even finishing. Nobody said that, but polishing or like working over and so stuff. It doesn't all have to work on the same thing. If I just look over the documents that we have, I wouldn't publish the OBOK because there's a different ambition, I think. The OBOK has, for me, the idea of being, finding a structure that can be that is a bit more crystalline. But the other things we have made are just kind of, bits still with the images that we, that we populated in those sessions, and I think they're like, for me, they're strong anyway. And yeah, I'm talking about kind of a bit participatory for those who want to, and if there's nobody, well, anyway, we gave it out, like, we're not losing, nothing is lost.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points from both. Like, the one thing I could comment on is also, like Mikael's point, that like who are we publishing to? It's not like traditional question of audience, but in the sense of like how, like what kind of people are likely to see it, and how does it potentially land on them? And I think this actually kind of connects to this larger idea, also this sort of potential of actually like calling something here research, and what that could bring. Like it connects to it in the sense that I've been thinking that there's definitely a potential people, if you get the tendrils to them, in the game community, and I think they would need a little bit more in the sense of like just like here's how you play it, kind of sense. But it's not necessarily much. It's like there is, I think, a big distance between doing something and polishing towards some kind of publication in even a half one. But in terms of like walking them in to like, yeah, oh, I can play this versus like it's interesting, but I don't know how to play this. Like I think that if one can kind of take that step to, oh, I know how to play this, I don't know what happens with it, and if that step is small enough, I think it's a valuable step. And then secondly, this context of that is kind of actually opening up to experimental organization, which is interesting. Like, which the common stack is interesting because, I mean, Pablo knows that if there is one group in the crypto space who is open to organization and 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 thinks of it from the get-go as one of the most important questions, and not just in terms of DAO, etc., it would be common stack. Like, so to open to those kind of people. There is a pathway actually that I can think of as a correlative, which is Lagrange, which is a kind of a game form that also a game to be played in some of these organizations, including Common Stack. And Lagrange is, once again, it's not much. I mean, they did a bit of graphic design because there is visual artists in the group, etc. But it raised a lot of interest compared to, in a way, like how still little it was. And I think like that's also a lesson of like it also contained this like how to play. Like I think it's not much, but it's this like, okay, here's what I do first, here's what I do next, kind of thing. And it clearly created this difference that people kind of were slightly confusedly, but still walking through it and playing it and getting the structure. But if there is not that, then it's a very different experience. And I think it would be useful at least to take the perspective that could one of these things or some of these things picked up and put into that kind of form, because I don't think it's necessarily too much. It's merely this question of like okay, like I know you're reading this for the first time, so here's how you do it. Because most of those documents are still kind of more internal communication. Like the XORG had like it sort of has the kind of bullet point rules, but it's really, those were written in the, like, okay, if we talk over this, then we can kind of expand these bullet points. But if I would put this to somebody else who doesn't know anything and doesn't have somebody there to talk with them, it wouldn't be enough. They probably wouldn't get the references. And I do think from OBOK, like with some cleaning up, like this, even the basic concepts might be interesting. Like, and like maybe some examples of here's how you can use them as play, and not to think of it as necessarily even a game. It can be, but like in this sort of like, okay, this is a form, and we can explain it through play and not keep it just as, you know, a concept. That's a other way of people potentially seeing like I can use this. So yeah, like that's kind of how I look at it in terms of thinking of audiences as well, like or people, like and it would be interesting if it is like okay, this takes one session of effort or two to get it to that point. If it's like, okay, 10 sessions of cleaning and polishing, then it's going against the common grain that we have.
Yeah, there's I'm thinking of like how games are released, and at least in Steam, I don't know in other stores, but there's this early access figure
Mm.
where
Yeah.
you just get into a game knowing that it's in, like it's not even that it's going to be patched. It's in development, in active development. Your saves might break, and I like that. So we can also tap into those, like the
Yeah,
formats of how games are released, expansions, versions, like that would be super interesting. And at this point, I think early access is sort of what we're talking about.
yeah, and the kind of itch.io approach that I was talking about is kind of similar, but even more low core. Like people have released, yeah, like couple of pages and saying like, okay, I have this basic idea. There should be this big part which has now one bullet point telling that there should be this, but there isn't, and people are happy with that because it's in the culture. But I do think it's something that it's happening on Steam, even though it's a big platform, for the same reasons that it makes sense. It makes sense to have this sort of dialogue. And people who are very successful at early access are usually using it to kind of build the community. Like people play it and say, hey, this is really interesting. What are you thinking of doing here and there, here? And then that becomes the development of the game. So like the itch.io approach is kind of the same, but even way, way more lower in terms of like the effort necessary to start.
Yeah, I really like that approach as well, and it's kind of, it may be because like I think a lot about like writing, and one thing that really helps, and also like I usually don't have that much time different experimental games and so on, but what I want is kind of I want to get the main idea and to understand the kind of basic ideas behind the game or behind the structures or something like that in the most simple form that one can kind of put them down. But like just that sort of like user friendliness is usually in my opinion good for kind of for the discussion, but so that people really can experiment. They can, so that the people have to be able to kind of try something out so that they can break something and provide feedback and information and so on. So I really like that, like earlier, yeah, a lot, but just like that there would be some sort of like walkthrough kind of to the approach that they need to have, or kind of have. I think that is even more important than what currently is on the document, kind of.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think it's actually a very interesting culture of Discord, this kind of a thing, that what it can kind of create. I'll share my screen again just quickly to show a cultural anecdote. So I'll go one page back. So I mean, this is a game in itch.io. I'm not saying it has to be itch.io, but just a good example of this culture. This is the whole page for the game. Like it's the image is actually enlarged, whatever. Like it's certainly not the best one. And then game that celebrates all genre fictions, cliches, etc. It has costed $1, but it's on sale 100% off. So it costs nothing currently. And then the game. Do you see this? Do you see now the River House game by Taylor Labreche?
No, we still see.
Oh
I
yeah,
still see the
yeah,
cliche.
I because I'll do it again. Because I was sharing a browser screen. Let's do that. Okay. So this is the cliche. I mean, it's actually a little bit better, slightly better graphic design, but it's still A4 with a couple of clip arts, and it's 3 pages. Um, um, uh, and it has a deck, but it says create your deck because it doesn't have a deck. and it's kind of one idea, and then there is a general mechanics on it. It's an okay idea, but I think the person who's made it essentially thought, well, this is an interesting idea. Why don't I publish it into a kind of small game in itself? And even though the rest of the mechanics I throw in are like, okay, something like this, and then evolved. It's not like these other parts are thought through, but it was just this interesting that what if there was a game that you had like cliches at the front or genre figures, and then you created the deck from them. So then you could play it like this, and that's the publication in itself. So in a way, it's very much kind of like throwing the game out there to have the idea for it. And like I said, I'm thinking exactly this, but just giving examples of like in a way, we're not that far off from those kind of things. And our time doesn't have to go to graphic design, whatnot necessarily, but still like just kind of maybe a cultural encouragement that these people are publishing things that are like essentially almost not ready or very, very kind of minimal things around one good idea, for example.
A small point kind of maybe in between and an interlude is that I think that right now is that like I see that Pekka, you and I think Mikael also, you're very much like the fascination you have, or the kind of point of kind of curiosity is with the game structure. For me, the fascination I have is mainly with the structures that appear. So like, whereas I really enjoy how you/we have set together the mechanic for each of the things that we've done, the thing that gets me is about, because I like I'm not clearly reading those as well as you do,
Yeah.
but like, I really live off the images that appear, because very beginning of joining you, what I seek to experience, maybe, or like what was the first motive for me to join you is like to kind of see how can I look at organizations differently, and there have many things been happening because I am in charge of organizations. I will be in charge of find new pathways of looking through them and at them, and so what we've been doing in the XORG sessions, there the game, I don't want to say it's instrumental to me, because it's, you know, creeping into becoming a fascination of its own, but like I live off the images we have come up with. So those for me are also, you know, I don't know what you would like to call it. Maybe that's where the zine came in, you know, like it's a kind of a short, it's a finished thing. You don't have to play it. I mean, it's great if you can play it just from reading what we recorded, then you can have another thing of the same type. But it's a thing that kind of now is part of the mega dungeon, you know, the first kind of few pixels of it. And if let me make this concrete. If we really think about a zine in a kind of printed way, or it's a PDF way or something like that, you would you could think maybe to populate the first couple of pages with that story, and then after you have written that or illustrated or whatever, drawn or what, you could put in the back of the couple of last pages what now kind of has appeared as the logic that brought that story about, so that other people could replay that. You see? So that's a bit kind of how I thought about this. It's funny to see the perspectives, I think, are a bit different in a way. But they're multiple, right?
Do finish. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that there are multiple perspectives. I think that's also a beautiful thing right now.
Yeah, I think it, like from my side, it's actually not that different. It's just like the reason to play these games is kind of to get to this sort of generative moment. And I emphasize the games because like my thought goes constantly to, oh, if this structure is like this, then it's likely to generate that. but the kind of like the actual goal is the generation itself. And actually, that's one of the among the many reasons why I kind of not only enjoy, but I think there is power in such game structures that are kind of coarsely can be called like generated game structures. I think there's actually more power to them than people think. Like it's almost like this competing, not competing, but the kind of alternate paradigm to games about winning. Is to think about, well, game is actually about what it generates. So for me, I could describe it so that, yeah, I like tinkering with the engines if the engines are games, but I like tinkering with the engines because you can travel with them, and it's ultimately about the travel of where you can get with them, like to put it in a metaphoric sense. So for me, it's extremely important. It's also like it's just like the emphasis of like, so the kind of generative moment makes me appreciate it, but at the same time think like, oh, what kind of things affected it? And that's not any kind of a hard science. It's not like I can say for sure that these kind of moments are generated from these structures, but at the same time, it actually is capable of doing this kind of generations because it has a lot of, it can take a lot of influences. It can say everything you thought, etc., can potentially enter into this game, and that has to make it soft in a certain way, but also it makes it interesting in this manner. So yeah, like but I like to kind of maybe concretize from that. That also puts this maybe a kind of bullet point to highlight, which I can add also in the notes because I wrote your comment about the structures that appear, is maybe like you can agree or disagree, but it's still emphasizing play testing, meaning this or play testing, because I think it has been helpful. There's actually diving into these structures and letting them work, and it also makes it kind of multicolored. It's like makes this XORG almost like an organization that you can find in any kind of weird state because it's playtesting something. It is interesting in itself, but also I think ultimately it's probably the best way to learn in a wider sense, like not just about the generation, but even these game structures, because you're learning them, the structures, and then you're learning what they do at the same time. I don't know, Martin, if that kind of aligns, or did my perspective point to a different direction for you, or?
No, I think so. I can completely support what you just said, because I think also the I mean, with me reading your point being that like making things game testable also for others, like replaying, that's a bit the point of it. And I see basically right now like agreement is almost too flat a word. It's almost too linear a word. I think it's a, to me, what I think is happening in this kind of perspectivation that I think we're working at toward of what could come. I really see how this is kind of multi kind of, you know, multinodal, or like, that's not a good word. What's the word here? Like it just there's different ways there's different things that have made this valuable now, that have made this experience here valuable. And I think consequently there's different forms in which that value will be captured going forward, can be captured going forward. And I think so in this way, I think, like, for example, this is also why I said earlier, like, it doesn't, like, we don't have to like decide on one form in which we want to output stuff. I think we can live with many forms in which we can output stuff, because to the same kind of joint exploration that we're driving. So if I were now to decide, I'm just going to copy paste the XORG version 1 thing out, and I would put it in a PDF thing that can be printed out, and then I would give a shot maybe together, or we take a shot together at like what was the game structure there. That can be as much of a side thought as a contribution to anything, or like something that vanishes in the eternal void. No loss, only gain, I think, at this point. And then like refining those structures, making sure they happen and they work, and what is it that happens when they are played multiple times, is like, to me, is equally valuable. Like, or even like, I don't know which one is more valuable. They're both beautiful.
Yeah, like just a short addition that one of these directions, which is strongly present in the saving capturing theme, and I don't think it's forgotten, it's kind of traveling in the XORG, but it was also mentioned there, is like that there is this whole like an almost like an architecture of a kind of world-like thing, but it's I started to call it like possible realms to make it different from possible worlds, but bring it together with the idea of possible worlds at the same time. And possible realms is kind of more flexible than possible worlds, because uh, it's me trying to awkwardly coin this idea of like what we're talking then is like there can be this sort of one building, and some people play through it, and some people but decide to uh, arrive to the same building in a completely different set of people at the end of what happened with the others, because they read a text that they create where they just tell what happened, or they might arrive to that same building before that happened, or that it doesn't happen at all, and and uh, and have a experience of it, like the building is not blown up or whatever, like whatever happened to the others. Like all of this are kind of instances of this sort of like the structure underneath those kind of things is really interesting, like how people share this, which people often call worlds, but there's something more happening that very much kind of shares this sort of possible worlds, but it kind of like has extreme modularity at the same time. And it also plays with time in the sense that it's not anymore time, but it's really like almost like a state. Like, okay, like um, it's even more. It's like state and a process. Like if somebody like describes a building, okay, now people know, oh, we could go with our group and visit the building. Then somebody describes, oh, we went to that building and this happened, and now the attic roof is blown off, and there is this and this ghost, whatever. Um, Somebody can also decide to arrive there, or arrive when the attic hasn't still blown off, but the ghost is lurking there, so that they're kind of taking the same pathway. And like taking all those possibilities, one has to say like there's more than like what we normally connect to possible worlds. So that's I think we were touching on precisely those kind of structures in the saving talk, and the kind of like expanding saving, which is a direction I think would be interesting to also release as an idea, as a structural idea in itself.
Hey, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. No,
Sorry,
no.
didn't mean to stop.
I've been talking long enough anyway.
No. I was just like thinking, and yeah, I probably have to leave in maybe 5 minutes or so. Family just got home, but I'm thinking if we are to pursue this common stack cooperation, then what do you think that would be a good strategy now in those terms?
Well, to put it practically, I think it would be good to. I put my practical hat on. Like first of all, it would be good to look at like some of the kind of culture of research proposals there, etc. A lot of those things go through like because they have community support, and that's something we could have a leg up because of these connections. But that's very kind of practical and would be possible. But maybe more importantly, even like I said, I'm meeting some of them for several days next week, um, and I will kind of, amongst other things, kind of talk a little bit about this, like not saying okay we're putting this, but actually kind of what would it entail and how they would see it, um, and that can inform this. And I think for us, it's really kind of like well, like coming up with what we would want to propose, like what kind of things we want to keep there or have there. Like for example, I would definitely vote for that if there is research, it's really like coming up with, say, game forms or results of game forms, these kind of things that we're talking about, but actually kind of proposing those as research. And because there is actually, I think it's quite valid, like it's like just we're talking about these possible realms. If you describe that as a structure or conception and make it 2 pages, whatever, that's decent research. Maybe not for traditional academia, but it's actually kind of like creating an idea in itself. But so are potentially the game forms, like, hey, here's a conception of organization you probably have never thought of, is for me. So 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 for us, this thinking of what kind of things, if we were to make such a proposal, what we would like to keep there. And then there's a lot of practical things, like, because I mean, this is like the proposal is potentially asking for funding, or is it like it's funding is not bad, certainly, but how would we use it, etc., and like things like this. So overall, I think it's still a kind of really an internal question along the lines we've been talking about, but maybe a little bit more further, with added like a little bit studying of how's the culture, which I can take some responsibility, and maybe Pablo, because you're already familiar with the culture, a little bit looking at that. Uh, Potentially Jakub as well, because he's familiar with Common Stack. He comes from those scenes. But like the important question is like, what would we like to propose if we propose for now?
I would be up to do some writing if necessary. I mean, yeah, with your guidance,
Likewise,
but yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Likewise, I've been intentionally promising myself writing to a couple of different places to kind of get that going, because there was a time when I wrote much more, and then came a time when I went to art, and then your writing shot, well, for various reasons, and then like running too much around has kind of broken these practices and routines. But I'm intentionally wanting to like include that element more. So yeah, but I think, yeah, we can see. I definitely think that if it's a like a danger of breaking everything, then we shouldn't probably do it. Like or shouldn't do it then. But rather, if we can make something that fits our spirit, and one practical thing more, doesn't have to be like selling your soul. It might be, we promise to do this one thing. It's not like whole XORG moves here. It can be like, oh, we have this interesting topic. We would like to actually write something to you, and the passage is really then that one thing. That's completely possible as well.
Yeah, seconded on that one. And I think like maybe it's, I don't know, I don't quite clearly see any image now for this, but maybe nobody does. But maybe it doesn't have to kind of supplant this format either. Maybe it will just add another strand to it.
Yeah. Yeah, very much. I think that would be the ideal, and I don't think there is too much pressure towards that. I mean, this goes to all these execution, etc. Like execution, literally, in a sense that it's not about forming an organization inside, but finding these connections between different things and different happenings and different processes.
Yeah,
that can
I mean,
stay as they are.
It can even be for us kind of almost a kind of a sandbox to try a new format.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's precisely the point, that's part of the kind of point of interest and value, like because I think we're on that path already. Like I mean, it's about experimenting with it, but like there is already this sort of quality of like experimental organization that can change its state constantly and be sometimes semi-fictitious, mostly fictitious in its state, like, which is kind of an interesting quality. Like I think it's actually a loss to give that away, because that's a speciality.
So I can't promise from my side any writing. I have at this moment the free time that I have in the day is measured in cups of coffee, cups of coffee, and but I would, for example, be super up for committing one session to that, and I mean, like now I've been enjoying this kind of mode of the open Google Doc that parallels the Zoom call. I think that's somehow it's a beautiful materiality, and maybe we could do that. And if anything, yeah, I think, like, particularly if we speak about the next 2 weeks, that's what I can do. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think this is also why to talk about it now, because it's not some kind of like there's a deadline, etc. Kind of a thing. But it's also like, since it was kind of on the table, and for me it's definitely then XORG, not me. Like I think this is much more interesting, more people, and it's about precisely the only way these kind of things can develop is forming a community, like in the flexible sense of a community. We are already a community in this kind of sense, or communities around this kind of thing. So, but it's of course then up to us whether we pursue that. But I think that the key question here is like this more general question of how do we see things going forward? Do people want releases out of this or not? These questions we have been talking about are important, even besides this opening doors, etc.
Yeah, one comment. I think I am kind of very much into seeing, at least like trying to go for releases. This is probably also because I have found that this is very useful for me in everything else that I do and as a hobby or as a work or so on, and what I really what makes me learn is kind of to go through these like processes, and I really enjoy the process if it's like making a piece of like art or a publication of any sort or something like that. It's always like very fruitful in the sense of like learning about the process, and then you can also like model it into some other like areas of life and so on.
Yeah, agreed. And so maybe it's all kind of pointing towards that. Anyway, the quality should be, if one goes towards releases, it's first kind of experimenting with that, like not to hit the nail too hard, like not promising too much to anybody. Might contain some kind of a promise, but it's like it should have this sort of like, let's explore these directions by those that have the motivation. This is not any kind of like everybody has to write minimum 2 pages kind of thing, but like, but if there are people that are interested in doing that, that's a like a nice branching out of these processes in and of itself, and then we can see what the effect is. But then it's also like something we can react to and take from there. And maybe that fits to this, even this sort of potential institutions, etc. That's something that probably will flesh itself out also in terms of knowledge in the coming week or so, and maybe coming weeks. But I like if it has this experimentality that give those that actually want those directions the space, that they are definitely kind of allowed to do that, and even encourage that. Maybe that's the way to approach this. Or how does it sound to you?
Sounds great.
And yes, and in terms of time, this has been long already, but a good conversation. I mean, this I think was definitely kind of a conversation in nature, or had to be like a. So I think Mikael has to go. I think we have to also think about going. There's not a hard line, but there's sort of a line after 6 anyway. So, but any last thoughts, like that kind of experimenting with this direction, but not kind of forcing it, was my first last thought kind of thing to put on the table on this topic. But any other last thoughts?
But should we then kind of next week come together and think a bit about form? Do you see me? Am I completely
Yes.
frozen?
You're
Yes, I can
fine.
see you.
You're fine, actually.
Okay. I'm not seeing any of you move or say anything.
Yeah, you're still coming through.
Okay. No, should we just like then maybe like next week kind of convene a bit and think of forms and topics, or how do you think?
That's a good question. Like, what about others? What do you think of that? Like, what do you think of next week?
Yeah, maybe we can have another session about this. I wouldn't want this to just become that we just meta talk about talking about the thing that we will do, but definitely if we individually think about it, we can come up with some, yeah, I don't know, more concrete ideas, examples, path forward. I'm not sure.
Mikael?
Maybe would it be just an idea, but would it be possible to kind of spend half of the time like kind of recapping and kind of continuing talking, but could there also be something like to get back on the mood of like
Yeah.
at least like talking about some potential structures or ways to play or something like that. But I really like the kind of idea of like mapping out also like kind of what sort of like topics do we want to kind of have discussion on and so on. I'm really excited about like just like taking a question or two or looking at the certain elements in the OBOK document or something like that, and just like trying to think how they would fit into different sort of like structures and ideas and so on, and that is something I'm very happy to kind of just like on my spare time to do and then just like have something to like comment when we meet or something like that. I really like to when I'm walking or something like that, just like oh, now I remember you had this and this like element and just like thinking about it for a while or something like that. So it's just great to have this sort of like a place where you can then just like oh hey or at the end like now of the discussion, oh hey now I remember we had this and this sort of like structure, and it would be very nice to try it out, and I was thinking this and this sort of thing, and so on.
Yeah, like how about this? Like I was kind of trying to congeal from this that like for next week, like I was already thinking of it, but like for example, I have some ideas to propose, like how one could revise, take forward the kind of OBOK direction, like, and we could like have a short discussion, and then whatever the development could be, kind of, it could happen even in its own group or the same group, but we don't have to do it then and there. And similarly, like there is the whole XORG, and this dungeon actually has some other ideas, which it has a really interesting relation with this sort of graph or kind of network that it could form, where we never really got to in the playtest, but it's like if you would continue to play, that would emerge. And so there is that. Similarly, like looking at what to test next and where could it go. And then there are other things, but the third one that comes to my mind is this sort of possible realms, and kind of visiting this developments from this saving question, one could call them, but also like, and I'm not saying that's the whole list from me, and certainly not the whole list that could come from you, everybody. But we could kind of visit that, okay, there are these directions to develop, and then still pick one of them and go more deeper into such for the rest of the session. Like, okay, let's test that particular thing. Because if I was getting you right, Mikael, you were thinking like the health session more tangible or more, not bird's eye view, but what is it, like a frog's eye view, I guess, in English?
Yeah, or maybe just like to keep them kind of both active or so on, but really no preferences as such, but like I was just very excited the developments of the last few playtests we had, and I think it's just very good to now that they are still very clearly in memory, and just to kind of use that, even if we are doing something completely different. There is a good flow there, I think.
Yeah, maybe actually, maybe the second half could sort of return in some slightly revised fashion to the playtest direction we have been going, the XORG. Because I think it's actually
the other way around.
Say again.
Or the other way around, no? Would it not be nice maybe to start with the play? Because we kind of still then at time we would still be educating ourselves on what we might.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we could do that as well. Like, like I'm completely open for that. Like as well. Like we can even decide in the beginning of the session, but like we can start with the play. Because I think it's good that it's not like 2 sessions of talking. Like it's good to keep the playing going. Like and I do think like Mikael's saying, the playtests were actually going into a good direction, and like I have a lot of thoughts of like of the potential of that. So like, but it's better to insert those thoughts into the play itself.
I think I need to go, people.
Yeah, I think we're ending in general. Like, I can go back to my conspiracy beer. I have a conspiracy beer. It has a conspiracy because it's 0.0, but then it says it has B12. And then I look at the ingredients, and there is only barley, hops, and extracts of hops. And I know that there are no plant-based sources of B12. We only have microbial and animal. So where does the B12 come from to this beer? The only reasons I can think of is that it's cheating. They actually put the B12 and don't put it in the ingredients for some reason. Or then they have come up with a vegetable-based B12 generator. So it's a conspiracy, that beer.
You know what? I think if you cut open the can and then you make a diagonal cut, you can make a tin hat out of it.
Yeah, yeah. That's probably that's why it's in a can. That explains a lot. Yeah, like yeah, it's a mystery of 0.0 beers. Like they're all a conspiracy, and you're supposed to cut them up and make a hat out of it. Okay, this makes sense. All
See
right,
you. Bye-bye.
I'll press this